And we're live. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us once again for a high vibe conversation. Today, I am joined by the amazing Dalia Feldheim. She is the author of Dare to Lead Like a Girl, and we are so excited to have her join us. With us today are Linda Vetrus Nichols, Dorit Carlson, Jenny Langren, and Stina Marie. And we will be talking all about trauma drama. So before we get into that, I want to remind everyone that this is a safe space. We invite you to share with us as we talk through our life lessons and hold space for you to work through yours. So, what that means, if you're new here, is that if you are resonating with what we're talking about, if you feel compelled to share, feel free to drop your comments into the chat, whether you're watching now or on a replay. We would love to have a high vibe conversation with you. So please, if you feel compelled to share, by all means, join us. That being said, if you feel compelled to join us more privately for an intimate chat, you can also reach us and connect with us on multiple platforms, LinkedIn primarily, but also YouTube, Facebook, wherever you can find us. We are here for you to ignite this conversation. And that being said, Dalia, welcome once again. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
So, as we kick off this conversation about trauma drama, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you, Dalia?
Um, well, I think the big thing is thinking everyone thinks, oh, their trauma is not that big. There's people with worse trauma. It took me a while to realize that I had post-traumatic stress disorder. And sometimes I meet a lot, women, domestic violence, etc. And I say, how dare me talk about trauma, right? So that's the first things that comes. But yeah, it is there. And it's there for, sadly, many people. And I think, luckily for me, very early on, I learned the concept of post-traumatic growth. I studied positive psychology. And I learned that term from, my teacher, Tal Ben Shachar. And, I realized that trauma can be a really good opportunity for growth. And not only we talk about resilience sometimes as bouncing back to where you were before, right? Post-traumatic growth is where you actually, utilize your pain to not only bounce back, but actually end up in a higher place because of your learning, because turn your pain into your purpose, or, so that's kind of, and today when I'm fascinated with stories of post-traumatic growth, and I studied it, what can help us get from, trauma to post-traumatic growth. And I think that's what the book is all about. People say that, yes, it's a book with personal stories, but it's a very positive book because I'm a positive person and I'm about, how can each one of us, because everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. Every time I interview or I'm interviewed, or, I do workshops in companies and people share their shit show or their fabulous failure, as I call it, kind of more politely, everyone has a story. And I think the interesting point is, how can we turn our pain into our purpose for post-traumatic growth?
So, is the trauma drama really like the story that comes out of it, like the dramatizing of it, or is the drama portion part of the trauma because people don't often realize that they're experiencing trauma, like, or is it both?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's something to be said about, the importance of perspective, right? And often when we're experiencing some level of trauma or even just hardship, right? I often talk about being in the waterfall, right? In Singapore, where I used to live for 10 years in the botanical garden, there's a beautiful waterfall, okay? But there's also like a beautiful cave where you can go behind the waterfall. And I use this as an analogy with, my students. And, when you're in the waterfall, that means the emotions are falling on your head. You're in the drama, right? You can't think straight because you're angry, frustrated, sad, etc. And the magic is kind of, how can I stop being in the waterfall and walk behind into that cave? I'm still seeing, the emotions are still there. I still have anger, have sadness, but it's very different than I am angry, I am sad, meaning I have this perspective. So when I often talk about it, step out of your drama so you can understand the movie, right? It's the same idea. It's when you're in the drama, everything is one big mess. I think I'm a rational person. I was head of women's network. I dealt with abusive bosses in the past, I volunteered in domestic homes. I actually parallel that, bullying in the workplace and domestic violence. In my head, there's a lot of similarities kind of in terms of the trauma. And yet when I was in it myself, so I was always on the helping side, okay, helping others deal with it. And yet when bullying happened to me, okay, I realized when I finally stepped back to have perspective that I was a frog in boiling water. And that term, a frog in boiling water, is a very important one, because when I did my thesis, okay, talk about it later, but I did my thesis in INSEAD about bullying in the workplace. And I interviewed 10 people. 6 of them used that term. I was a frog in boiling water, which I thought was really interesting. So that's the drama. It's when you're a frog in boiling water and you need some perspective so you can jump out of it.
I don't know which thing to quote because you just said so many good nuggets. I'm going to come back to one you said a few minutes ago, which was, and correct me if I butcher it a little bit, step away from your drama so that you can see the movie.
Yeah.
That
Understand your movie. Yes.
yeah, is if you can step back, if you can step out of it and gain a different perspective, because we can't see what we're actually in, what we're going through, and all the different facets of it when we're actually in the muck, right? So it takes stepping away from it to fully understand and have that clarity and to be able to move through it. Yeah.
And I can share with you, maybe I'll just share, during my teaching. So I teach at the University of Singapore Management University, positive psychology. And I came across, I wanted to understand my trauma, right? So research is me search. And that's why I chose to do my thesis on bullying in the workplace. That led me to discover positive psychology. I started studying positive psychology with Tal Ben Shahar, who's kind of considered Harvard's guru. He has a school, Happiness Studies Academy. One thing led to another, and I started teaching positive psychology in Singapore Management University. And I came across a theory, the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And within that, there's like a theory that I use a lot with my students that I think helps understand that. It's called the 3E theory, okay? There's an event, and we have an emotional reaction to that event, right? And we think it is directly linked. So we're reacting emotionally to that event. However, in between, there's something called evaluation. Okay, so we're not actually reacting to the event, we're reacting to that evaluation of that event. It's the glasses we choose to see, right? As an example, I always use one of my husband's close mates passed away. Okay, really, really sad. One of his friends got into deep depression because of that. The event, the guy passed away. The emotion that person experienced was deep sadness and deep depression. My husband, on the other side, got into a crazy carpe diem, right? The guy died. He was healthy. Life is short. Let's seize the day. So same event, but very different emotional reaction because the evaluation of the event was totally different. So when we're in a trauma, often, we're reacting emotionally and we think we're reacting directly to the events, but there's something in between that evaluation. And unless we step out of that drama to say, is my evaluation correct? Is it really me? Is it the other person's story? what is going on here. And for me, I can tell you that evaluation was when my first boss, okay, which is my mentor and friend until today, read some of the examples. I finally sat down and I wrote. By the way, writing, journaling is the most proven way to get that perspective, to look at your evaluation. Because after 3 years of bullying, one of my direct friends said, just write it all down. And I sat down one night and I just wrote 4 pages of examples, right? Because I'm in the drama, I'm dealing with it. I'm a, resilient, tough cookie, right? I sat down and I wrote everything, 4 pages, and then I sent them to 2 people. I sent them to my husband and I sent it to my first boss, Jim. And Jim called me within a second and he said, Dalia, this is bullying. You need to get out of that. And that was the evaluation or that perspective. I suddenly realized it's not me that's crazy. It's not me that, everything. I'm in a situation, that person, has his challenges. Some of them are connected to me. Maybe I have a role in amplifying it. And I'm sure I did, because often the more resilient you are, the more you experience bullying. Maybe I was kind of a little, stood up and tried to change him, feeling that I'm a coach and I can coach up. And I realize you can't change someone that doesn't want to change. But I think that is the most important. So if you're experience any type of trauma, and sometimes even the word trauma sounds huge because I'm a victim, or whoa, this is big. So let's not say trauma, let's just say pain. The smallest physical or mental pain, your experience, something is going on that's causing you sadness, right? The first thing I always say, just sit down and write it all down. Write it all down, read it, and try and get behind the waterfall. Try and get out of the drama of the emotions to understand what is going on. Often it's a different story that had nothing to do with you, and you're kind of internalizing and taking it all on. So I think that's kind of an important point. Journaling, it's proven. Thinking about a traumatic, it's researched by Sonia Lubomirsky. If we're thinking about a trauma, just thinking it in our head, we are actually reliving trauma and we make it significantly worse. So she measured 3 groups. First group were just thinking about the trauma. Second group were talking about the trauma, okay, with a friend, not with a psychologist even. And third group were journaling about the trauma. And what they found is the first group, and then they measured well-being and other health measures, and they found the first group were actually worse. So God forbid someone went through a rape and they're thinking about it, they're just reliving that situation, or even a smaller pain, okay? The second group talking about it already saw build in well-being and health. Just talking about it, not even with a psychologist. And I think that was the first thing, that was the beginning of my healing, when I actually started sharing the story with the objective of helping others. But from all those groups, the third group, which wrote about it, their life, satisfaction went out significantly. And why? Because when we're talking, so when we're ruminating and just thinking about it, we're reliving it. But the other two, when we're talking about it or writing about it, we're activating our frontal cortex, which is the analysis. We're bringing in some level of why did it happen? What did I learn from it? And that is where the healing happens. So, I guess I first kind of wrote down the experiences. Then I talked about it for the first time in this women conference. And Tal was in the audience and he said to me, Dalia, you need to speak on TED and you need to write a book. And I remember I literally went, me? I'm any girl next door, right? He's a wise man. So I gave my TED talk in 2019 and I sat and I wrote, my book, which is kind of all my learnings with the hope that it will help someone out there, not only dealing with pain, but looking for any type of post-traumatic growth.
That's brilliant, Dalia. I can so relate to that, and the way you broke it down into the three groups, and we're talking about that study. for me, it was almost the same. I had a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist that I would see regularly, and I felt like I wasn't making any progress because I was just talking about the same things over and over again from a different perspective, or trying to, prompted by the professional. And a similar experience when I was chatting with friends. They were only being able to see it through one lens or focal point. And it was when I actually worked with Linda to get my story out there that I had more clarity and more peace and could move on, because I also not only was I journaling to get it out for myself, but I was journaling to get it out for others and to bring that story to light so that other people could read it, relate to it, and have conversations around it. So I fully
Amazing.
can resonate with that study from every aspect. Linda, that's a perfect segue for me to come over to you now. When you work with your clients to write books or take them through the healing process, is it a similar way that you're getting them to? And I've gone through it, so I can say from my perspective. But the way that you do it on your end, are you taking people out of their drama and out of their trauma so that they can move past it? Like, can you talk a little bit more about the trauma drama from that perspective?
Well, what I have noticed is definitely yes. So, kind of my thing in the world now is people help supporting people to stay sane, and getting it even down to this whole living in non-duality where everything just is. You can't have drama because drama comes from this is good and this is bad, just exactly the way Dalia described it. You know, the friend dying and the way her husband took it and the way the other person took it. One person took it as really bad and one person took it as really good. And that's about duality. So when something happens, it just is. And now what are you going to do about it? And her husband made his choice. And the other person, I'm sure, was just completely overwhelmed by the whole thing. You know, it's not a finger pointing thing right now. So that's kind of the bottom line. When it comes to the books, it's getting people to that, what I call the level of the fully embodied soul. Like, we actually can kind of float around outside of our bodies, you know, and especially with trauma, we leave our bodies. My background is special ed, and special needs kids leave their bodies all the time. They're usually not in them. If there's physical trauma, you're just not going to be in there. And so bringing your soul, if you will, back into your body, into your abdomen, into that power center, where like Pilates teachers and yoga teachers, Dalia is a yoga teacher, right? That core, right? It's the human power center as well. And how do I do it? Just, you know, reach out and pull it back in. They say that when we do astral travel, we actually do come back into there's a connection to the umbilical cord there. So they call it, I think, the silver cord. It's really interesting. Like, all this stuff has been sort of proven when I look backwards, but it's just been based on intuition and really observing and noticing what works, what gets them further faster. So that's a long answer to your question. Keeping someone fully present, which means keeping their ego quiet. And there's nothing wrong with the ego. That's part of the human body, just like your heart is part of the human body. So my husband always says, make decisions with your heart, use your soul for counsel, and your brain for storage. And I always say temporary storage, right? And that's what Dalia is talking about. Like, don't keep it up in your brain, you know, speak it out. With trauma, you've like lost your voice. And so in the work that I do, it's about witnessing and making you feel like you're not crazy. When someone else can witness and see the patterns and help you guys to see the patterns. You've all been through my process. All the high vibes here. So yeah. So anything else, Shell? Did I answer it in a very roundabout way, or?
No, you covered it brilliantly. Thank you. When when you take people through that CR process and that release, can we talk a little bit more about the release that you've done with us to get out the things that we feel like we've been holding on to? Because that certainly creates a level of ongoing trauma and drama for I think I could speak for all of us, but certainly myself. Like, I think when we hold on to it and can't release it, it lingers. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, you're talking about repetitive behavior, cellular regression, which is something my husband figured out. We further developed it. And so the tail end of it, so I don't do that piece with my clients. They would go to Terry usually. I mean, I could take them through, but I haven't. Stina's been through the process, but the rest of you haven't. So the tail end of it, though, is the release. And it's about chewing out the perpetrator, if you will, the number one perpetrator, and then the next one and the next one. So the only reason I do that release with my book clients is because when they're doing what I call the soul exercise, where it's like, if you're poofing off the planet tomorrow and there's only one thing you can let the rest of us know, it's not about you, but it's so important for you to let us know, which is like what Dalia's book's all about, like that cautionary tale stuff, right? What is it? And the next one and the next one and the next one. And that just becomes their message for the world. That becomes their 12 chapters. And I just do an interview process. And so people can't make it through that simple exercise if there's someone in the way, so to speak, and someone who doesn't want them to use their voice, someone who doesn't want them to speak out, and sometimes on them. So we it's just a simple bring up their face, chew them out, and then do the forgiveness line. I love you and I forgive you, so I can love me and forgive me. Is that what you were referring to, Shel?
That's exactly this whole exercise. That's exactly where I was going with that, because I think that's such a big part of like being able to move on. Not necessarily to let it go completely, because it's always going to be a memory, like a part of you, but like being able to forgive and love and accept. So thank you for adding to that. Dory, I'm coming down to you now. What's coming up for you when we talk about trauma drama?
What's coming up for me is, well, first I thought of my youngest daughter, Ellie, and how she was bullied at school from around about 10 years of age, and she just turned 23. And what Dalia said about people kind of accusing you for not having enough trauma, because Ellie is highly sensitive. She is very empathic, and so she is kind of experiencing everything like 10 times stronger than the next person, perhaps. So for her, that was like the worst, and she still has really big troubles with trusting people and relationships, getting new friends. In the workplace, she can be, if, for instance, just the other day, she was kind of upset because there were 2 other women in this workplace where she is, and they were speaking to each other like this. And she felt that they were trying to hide it from her. So she took it personally because of her background with the bullying and everything. So that was my first thought, how a little thing can have such a big impact on someone's life. And me as a mom trying to help her through this. We have 5 kids and she was the youngest one. So for me, it was always important that she got her confidence that she was doing something that made her better in one area than some of the other kids. They each had their thing, and she shouldn't be just the little one, always too young to join the others, and all of these things. So she had singing and drawing, and some she would write too, like little poems and stuff. So I would always encourage her to draw or sing, or join me for walks with the dog, so we could just talk about whatever she wanted to talk about, up until she was around 15, where she had her first she started going to a psychiatrist for about a year. About a year she was there. So that was kind of the only thing I could think of was, don't keep it bottled up. Because when I was a kid, I was bullied too, but that was in the 70s and 80s, and no one talked about that. It was just fend for yourself, you can cry or you can fight back. So what I missed was to have someone help me get it out, so I didn't keep it bottled in, and I didn't know that I had PTSD until I looked back on my life. Now I'm will be 53 in a couple of weeks, and I could see that the more I learned about the PTSD in women and how it kind of manifests and what's the symptoms in a way, the more I was like, oh God, that was me. That I did that. I was like, what? So I didn't know. I just thought that was the way I was born, but apparently not. And after this whole process with Linda and everything that's been going on, whew, good riddance. Yeah.
Right. Endure it. It's really like complex PTSD, because there was the bullying, then there was rape in just out of high school, was it? Or
Yeah.
high school?
Yeah, a week before I turned 16. Yeah.
Yeah, and all being like held in and not really talked about. In fact, it wasn't until you're on High Vibe Live, right? Like, what came out doing your book, and one came out while we were right here on live together, because it was like that pushed down for you. So
yeah,
it's always so fascinating when you have others to witness you and to support you, and you're doing your own work as well. It's so beautiful.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, I've rambled off and on and off. Thank you, Shell.
Well, it's our pleasure to hold space for you, Dorit, as you share, as we all share during these conversations. And that's the beauty of them, really, is that we can talk about our trauma and our trauma drama and our drama and all the other topics in between, and like hold space for one another in a very non-judgy way, in a very safe way, in a very like making you feel seen and comforted way. And that it makes me feel so full just being able to witness you as you all share. So thank you for being here. Jenny, I'm coming over to you now. What's coming up for you as we've been talking about trauma drama?
Thank you, Shell. Seeing you again, Dalia, it brings me back to the time of Humans First. Do you remember? That's where we first met. Humans First is the initiative, a movement created by Mike Vicanti that brought us all together during the pandemic.
It was a lifesaver. I can tell you, I was just evolving from a corporate role to opening my own business as a consultant, and suddenly having 300 consultants out there as a family, all with an aligned mission to put humans first in the workplace and in life. I can tell you, I mean, that's where we met first. And that was such an amazing, and that's linked to what we were speaking before, right? Having a tribe, a tribe of like-minded people, turning pain into purpose, right? Or mess into message, right? Tony Robbins used that phrase. So yeah, I have a very warm place in my heart to, you know, Mike and Humans First and Linda and Jenny and you and everyone, you know, my tribe there. So I think it's great. And we did it, you know, it helped a lot in the pandemic, but I think, you know, the sense of belonging and the connection is still so important. So I'm a big believer in this tribe. Thanks, Jenny, for bringing it up.
Yeah, happy to. And also it brings me back to where I was in my life at that point. And I was healing. I was just beginning to heal from a 10-year toxic relationship. And I remember that it was so dramatic for me to be on those lives and just recognizing that people were holding space for me, that people wanted to hear from me, that people wanted to hear my voice and my thoughts and my opinions. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that time. And during the process of healing and letting go of the drama, stepping out of the drama, for me, it's been about reclaiming my power and recognize that I have choice. Because I didn't feel like I had choice when I was in those circumstances, which was a lie. I was making choices every day. I was just not in my body to be conscious about how I was making those choices. So stepping out of the drama for me has been reconnecting with pleasure. Anna Linda's been helping me with that one. And bringing my presence back into my own body and recognize that I am the role character or the main character in my life, and that I get to allow other people to be the main characters in theirs. Because I used to be so much in the things that I could not control, which is also other people and other people's behavior and such. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful process. And I love that you bring up the image of the waterfall, because I also use the image of water and standing in massive floods of water, because that was drama for me. I felt like I was in the surprise, or in the, you know, why is this happening? Just like trying to hold that water. And for me, it's been about accepting and letting go and allowing things to simply be. And I think it's really about opening up to the lessons. It's about going from why to what is this teaching me, and allowing that water to take me with it and be open and curious and see, you know, just enjoy that journey and that transition, and recognize that it is, you know, it's healing from trauma is not change. You don't change back. It's a transformation. I know the feeling of being that butterfly that is like climbing out of the cocoon, like you're not going to go back in there. It's just a beautiful process. And I love working with my clients and seeing them in that stuckness, or that experience of stuckness, and just speaking to them from my perspective, that from where I'm sitting, you're not breaking down, you're breaking through. And just having that faith and knowing that there's other people who have gone before and who have done similar journeys like you, Dalia, and all of us, is so encouraging to them, and was also to me hearing about other people's stories of transformation. Love seeing you again, Dalia.
Thank you, Jenny. And I want to just chime in a moment with the water, because it's actually interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about two things. I mean, first of all, my company is called Flow Leadership, okay? It's the yoga, it's the water, because it's exactly that, is how do we create flow again? But I think when you were talking and I had this image of this murky swamp, right? That you're in. And I just kind of, came to mind the teaching of in the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu. And he talks about negative emotions, right? And often we try to fight negative emotions, right? And he uses the analogy of fighting negative emotions is like stirring murky water, right? Because they just become murkier and murkier. And what you need to do is exactly as you described, to sit in stillness, right? And to allow this mud to settle so that you can see clearly. And I thought that was a really, I just wanted to share it with the audience, because as you were talking, yes, we do all have negative emotions. And, Tal, in positive psychology, we talk about giving ourselves the permission to be human. Who doesn't have negative emotions? Only psychopath or dead people, right? So the fact that we have the negative emotion means we're alive, right? And we can't hide them. If we hide them, they will come up somehow in trauma, in sickness, in disease. They will find a way to come out at some stage. So how can we stop, suppressing? And I taught in Asia, and in Asia, you don't talk negative emotions at all, right? And I had to work with my students and, don't suppress, express, but find the right way to express the emotions, or at least start with accepting, and I have crazy stories for my students that open up with their parents, etc., for the first time. So I just wanted to share that analogy. Thanks, Jenny. And I love the, you're not breaking down, you're breaking through. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. And the humans first experience for my husband Terry and I was this like heart opening. That was the focus there was so much about like opening one's heart, and I loved that. And then the pleasure that what you and I have worked on together, Jenny, comes from the teachings of Stina Marie, and I really appreciated all the learnings that I have gotten from her as well.
Well, Stina's certainly got some powerful teachings. I'd love to hear some of them right now if you're open to sharing with us, Stina. What's coming up for you when we talk about trauma?
Thanks, Jill and Linda. I am thinking about reparenting when it comes to our trauma drama, and how I think that this kind of generation and the trend, there's a lot more talk about healing our, mother wound, or looking at, how we were parented and our attachment styles that we've developed. So those things are like coming more, I would say, into more mainstream conversations about mental health and healing. But I was listening to a podcast where the doctor talked about how important it is how we like respond and repair when we have like failed our kids, so if we mess something up, it's actually not that big of a deal. It's just then looking at how we handle it, how we respond, how we repair that connection, and that we only need to get it right about 30% of the time to have a secure attachment with our kids, which then translating that to ourselves, how can I get it right 30% of the time to build a secure, self, to have that connection with myself that is secure, which 30% isn't even like a passing grade, right? Like that's like in school, that wouldn't even get you through a class. So I think about my perception of what's acceptable as a straight A student. Well, that's a 94%. I'm not even talking A minuses. Like we're going to keep it up here in the A to A plus range. And that means I'm trying to do like 3 times as good of a job as is even like necessary. And I think that sets us up for more of the trauma drama, more of the roller coaster, because we think, oh, we have to aim for perfection. And perfection is 10 steps ahead of where we're even at. And so we fail to take that one step, like Dalia talking about journaling. Anybody that can write in some form can pick up, a tool and write. We can grab the pen and paper. We can pull up a document on our computer. Like we can do that right now today to start journaling. And how many of us will put that off and even say, I need to journal every morning. I'm going to journal every morning starting tomorrow. I'm going to get up. I'm going to have this time. What if you just said, I want to journal, and then you did it. And then maybe you do it in 3 days, and then maybe you do it the next day, and then it's 5 days before you do it again. Like that to me is being at a 30% success rate, where like Linda was talking about, the idea of being in pleasure and presence and really staying, embodied in your body, is to say, I'm going to do this thing, instead of looking into the future and thinking like, and then I have to get it perfect every other day for it to work. It just that creates a lot of that drama, because then you're always feeling like, oh, I missed journaling, and now it's, I've let myself down, and there's disappointment, and there's frustration, and there's, all of the self-judgment that comes into it. I also found it really interesting. I'm listening to a book called Getting the Love You Want, and he talks a lot about the ways that our parents' like voices are, kind of installed in our head, and the way that they parent us is so present, that if you had a parent who shamed you or suppressed or otherwise kind of ignored like certain emotions you would feel. So if anger was not acceptable in your home, if confusion was dangerous for you, if sadness or grief was like, oh, we don't do that, then anytime you feel that emotion as an adult, you get a little jolt of anxiety, because there's this part of you that's like, oops, we're feeling something we shouldn't be feeling. Like there's an alarm to just having a normal emotional response. And so, just looking at those ways to slow down, to take one meaningful step, to get present, and to get out of that hyper vigilance and that like I've noticed that for myself, like the spinning and the like, just feeling like I have to figure all of this out right now. That's the trauma response, because when trauma is happening, no matter how small it is, someone disregarding your grief or your anger or your sadness as a child, or a catastrophic event, we're having that experience of I can't figure this out. This doesn't make sense. Something doesn't match up. And we end up with these stories that are kind of like bad connect the dots, like we miss dots. We end up with a shape that's not what it's supposed to be. And I think that when you can slow it down, bring it back, get behind the waterfall, all of these things that we're talking about, is when you create a sense of security and safety for yourself, that no matter what's going on, no matter what's unknown, no matter what's uncertain, I can be here for myself. I can be here with myself, and feel that even if things don't make sense, even if everything's not perfect and figured out right now. And I've felt that in my own body, in the last couple of weeks. I had a rough week and a half, and my appetite was gone. And I got to the point of like, well, we're going to the hospital if you cannot get some food in your body. Like, this is not going to be good in a few days. So, are we going to figure out how to just come into safety, or are we going to keep waiting until you can mentally, sort all of this out and make sure that it's, externally safe and protected? So finding that within yourself, much more empowering than continuing to try and control external things and make them make sense.
Great summary. Way to go, Bean. Stina and I are both experienced in the whole perfectionist thing. And I love, Stina's a copywriter, and like her A-level copywriting is like pretty much no one on the planet could even appreciate it. It's that good. And she figured out that she doesn't need to do A, really not even B. She can get paid for C work. And I just love that so much, of that, just that mental way of releasing ourselves and dropping the bar, if you will, to like, who cares? It doesn't even have to be that, and not be so hard on ourselves. And one of her books is Worship Her, Dalia. I thought you'd like that. And the other one is Know When to Leave, Trigger Proof Your Life, Know When to Leave. So those are great titles.
Yeah, I really like the idea that, we we often look for the answers externally, right? So for me, I was trying to first change the environment, and you learn you can't change someone that doesn't want to change, or change myself to fit in. And then I felt like I left my heart and, my art at the doorway and didn't bring them into, I wasn't being my full self. And it's only when you're, talk about present. The reason I'm a yoga teacher, okay, on top of being kind of that's a side job, but I do it, and I have my little every time I feel I'm out of my body, I just kind of touch it and just ground myself to realize that I have everything I need to succeed right here in my heart, right? And instead of trying to control the external, I'm also a control freak, an ex-competitive gymnast, perfectionism, etc. And the moment you realize, that's out there, I can't control that. I can only control how I choose to react to that, what I accept, what I don't accept, how I want to lead my life, no matter what happened, right? So I think that's really, really powerful. The idea of coming back to yourself, coming back to your strengths. In the corporate world, I talk a lot about coming back to your strengths, right? We know when everyone is amazing, everyone has gifts in different area. And sometimes when we are, experience some kind of trauma, it's kind of the universe way to kind of give us a slap that we're not fully aligned, in a spiritual way, if you like, with our gifts, right? And it's going back to them and bringing them out and kind of living them. That's when we succeed. So I really love that, Stina. Thank you.
It reminds me of what Dorit does to get back into herself. I know and I trust, right, Dorit, and finding that safe space within yourself. So yes, Stina, thank you for such a powerful share. I've seen exactly what you're talking about with the 30%. I think we actually talked a little bit about it earlier this week as well. Dalia, now that you've experienced all of us talking about trauma, drama, where can people find you? Where can they reach you if they want to learn more about you, your book, and your teachings?
So online, daliafeldheim.com is my website. LinkedIn, Dalia Feldheim. LinkedIn is probably the best. I really try. I'm a relationship person, as Linda knows, and Jenny. So I really try to connect, and people can ask me anything. And then the book, the book is super exciting. It's now going on to audiobook. I keep on saying when people, you're holding a piece of my heart in your hands, because really it's kind of my whole heart and soul and learning and experiences. And I try to write it as a practical guidebook, leadership. It's focused on leadership in the workplace, but we know it's leadership of my family, leadership of my life. It's all about finding your purpose, finding your strengths. I call it 5P, purpose, perspective, which is that mental going behind the waterfall. It's your power up, which is all about your physical, because we often, especially as women, forget about that energy and, put in the mask, the oxygen mask on us first. It's all about the people, right? And the relationship and the importance of those people, with the most important relationship, of course, being yourself, right? Your relationship with self. And then finally, positivity. And my bully boss, I'll just finish with this. My bully boss kind of jokingly used to call me Miss Kumbaya. He kind of thought I was too positive, right? And then when I started studying positive psychology, I realized that everything I intuitively believed in is grounded in research of positive psychology. And it's actually good for business in almost every domain to be positive. Positivity is contagious. It brings hope. It aligns your brain towards kind of the direction. It focuses on what you have, on your strengths versus what is missing. It teaches you. It's not about the glass half full. It's teaching you that you have a whole jug out there that you own, right? That you can pour in, into your glass any day. So I think that's kind of the idea of the resourcefulness of the post-traumatic growth, that you have that jug of resources available to you. So that's kind of where you can reach me, and of course Facebook and others, but probably LinkedIn would be the best. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the book and if it made any impact on your life. And I'm getting these amazing emails, and maybe I'll finish with that because it brings out hope. When my TEDx came out, if you want a 15-minute summary of the book, you can watch the TEDx. Look for Dalia Feldheim, Dare to Lead Like a Girl, as you're walking on the beach with your dog. But when the TED came out, I got thousands of calls from women that decided to make a brave move, from men. But the craziest call I got was from a guy in Australia, and he calls me up and he says, Dalia, I wanted to say thank you. I watched your TEDx and I realized that I'm an asshole. What can I do? Right? So, sometimes we think, there's a lot of bad intentions. Sometimes there's lack of awareness out there, or a different value system, or reapplying negative kind of patterns. So, I'm hopeful about people in general. So it's about raising, and I'm sure, we all can learn to be better people and leave other people just a little bit happier than what they were before they met you. So that's my objective.
Thank you, Dalia. We will be sure to check out your book for those of us who haven't already done so. Make sure to connect with Dalia on LinkedIn. Let her know what you thought of the book. Let us know what you thought of this conversation. And of course, if you got anything out of it, we want to know. We want to be able to support you and continue the conversation with you. So make sure to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. That's Shel Shapiro. Follow and connect with me on LinkedIn, and make sure to connect with the other High Vibe women as well. LinkedIn is probably the best platform to do that on as well, but wherever you can find us, we're here for you. Until next week, join us for another High Vibe conversation. We will say bye for now.
Thank you so much.